Kanapu. So we're going to go to Steve Ellis. Good afternoon, Steve. Thank you for joining the committee. We have you for 5 minutes this afternoon. Thanks for joining us slightly early. I'll hand over to you to begin your submission.
Thank you. And by way of introduction, I'm Steve Ellis, a resident from Christchurch, along with my wife of 55 years. I've raised and educated 3 children. I'm retired and will celebrate 78 years of age next week. I was born in Christchurch and raised and educated in a single-income, single-parent household. This came about when my father took off for Gisborne with another woman when I was 9 years old. I never saw him again. My 3 brothers and I were raised and educated by my mother, who worked very hard to work off the debt pile left by the old man. We were essentially latchkey kids, having to be independent and organised. My mother died in the late 60s from years of hard work. I worked and paid taxes for some 40 years in various parts of this country and also overseas. I have, over the past 20 or so years, undertaken various volunteer and unpaid work. I see myself as a New Zealander, a member of the Mahi ethnic society, governed as a democratic state. I reside in New Zealand, a country that is well recognised internationally as a fair and equitable nation. Like of note, I don't hold a grievance. Turning to my submission, I support the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill, subject to modification of Principle 2 as currently proposed. Paraphrasing, the overarching objectives of this bill are to provide clarity and certainty of future legislation enacted by Parliament, amongst other objectives. Since 1975 and the passing of the legislation of the Treaty of Waitangi Act, this nation, New Zealand, has been undermined through attempts by judicial interpretation to concoct concepts of Crown-iwi partnership. This has led to an insidious embedding within recent legislation, ever since 75, of protections of supposed superior rights for Maori over other New Zealanders. These are along with unnecessary costly obligations for citizens in business and private enterprise to consult with Maori in the day-to-day running of this nation. In my view, there is no partnership as between the Crown and iwi. The Treaty of Waitangi did not create or prescribe such a concept. Further, those Maori present at the signing of this treaty ceded sovereignty to the Crown. As such, it is the Crown, via the New Zealand government, that has the right to govern New Zealand. In doing so, I believe the government will assert that all New Zealanders are equal before the law. It is not the place of courts and agencies such as the Waitangi Tribunal to continue to finesse the minority interests of Maori to the disadvantage of all other New Zealanders. To continue to do so is an overt exercise in granting an individual or group a political and or economic advantage due to their ancestry, something to be absolutely avoided in a modern democratic society such as New Zealand. Turning to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill, particularly Principle 2, this strives to create protection for iwi and hapu of certain supposed rights when they are specified in treaty settlements. Such protection, expressly from iwi and hapu, will, in my view, only continue to give the Waitangi Tribunal, with its taxpayer-funded open wallet, a green light to continue to demarcate in favour of the minority interests at the expense and to the detriment of a significant majority interest of all other New Zealanders. Further, it invites the courts to play an exaggerated role in determining a judicial view of the legislation as proposed. In supporting this bill, I urge that this committee modify the proposed Principle 2 by deletion of the specific reference to iwi and hapu and restore the Principle 2 as it was originally drafted. This will protect the property rights of all New Zealanders, thus avoiding any provisions for separate superior rights for iwi and hapu. Leading this bill is promoted by the ACT Party and Mr Seymour in particular, as a well-intentioned and intelligent attempt to correct the lack of balance in this nation's growingly unstable debate around race relations. In my view, there can be no issue with legislation that defines the following for all New Zealanders. 1, the New Zealand government has the full right to govern New Zealand. And 2, the New Zealand government will protect all New Zealanders' authority over their land and property. And 3, all New Zealanders are equal under the law, with the same rights and duties without discrimination. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for your submission this afternoon. Right on time, so that's the 5 minutes. So on behalf of the committee, just want to acknowledge you for being with us and for providing your submission. Okay, folks, we'll go to our next submission from, we're out on the list, Ngati, where are we? Ngati Kapi Marae. They haven't appeared yet. We have Wayne Knox.
No, we don't. We do have it for the Hapu game. Would like to think one more time.
So how about we give them one more go and see if they can get in with, and see if they've got their audio working. So we're going to try and bring Te Tawera Hapu back in. So we have Dr. Podoto on screen. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have any video or audio. And so we don't have any of the other submitters with us yet either. So Ngati Kapi Marae is not here.
No.
And neither is Wayne Knox.
No.
Okay, unfortunately, folks, we're going to have to suspend again. So what I'm going to suggest is that we've got a break scheduled at 3. So what I'm going to suggest is that we'll take a longer break now till 2:55. So we'll reconvene at 2:55 and we'll try and get the submitters that we haven't managed to line up. No, now we've got someone else popping in. And they're now.
Kia ora.
Okay, so we've got Te Tawera Hapu with us now. So let's bring Dr. Ngaropo in. So thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties in bringing you in, but we have you here and I think we'll be able to hear you loud and clear. So we've got you for 10 minutes. I'll hand over to you to begin your presentation.
Tēnā koe te kai hautu o te rōpū whakarongo mai ki wā mātou kōrero e pāna ki te kaupapa Treaty Settlements Bill. Nō reira tēnā koutou ngā kai hautu o ia tūrong i a rōpū o roto te pāwanatanga. Tēnei te tāwera ko tai mai te whakatakoto i ona kōrero. O tira e whakahē nei mātou tēnei pire. Kāre he take kāre i te hāngai ki te wairuatanga i mōhiotia i o mātua tūpuna i te wā i hangahia mai tēnei kaupapa. Nō reira, tēnei ka mihi atu ko tai mai te tāwera Ngāti awa mātātua ki te whakaputa i ona kōrero. Mr. Chairman, members of the Select Justice Committee, this presentation today is from Te Tawera Hapu of Ngati awa mātātua matata. My name is Dr. Pauroto Ngaropo. I'm also a descendant of Ngāpuhi, Te Rarawa, Tainui, Waikato, Poto, the tribes of Tauranga, Ngāti Ranginui, Ngāti Rangi, Ngāti Pukenga. I also have strong affiliations to the people of Te Puke, namely Waitaha, Tapuika and Tūhaurangi ki o Tukawa. I have tribal affiliations to Te Arawa Whānui, and in particular Ngāti Pukea, Ngāti Tamatea Tūtahi, Ngāti Kawiti, Ngāti Mākino, Ngāti Rongomai, Ngāti Tarawhai, Ngāti Whakaue, and Tūhaurangi ki Ngāti Wahiao. I have whakapapa connections to Tūhoi, Mr. Chairman, Te Whānau Panui. My affiliations also. My main tribal affiliation today in this submission to the subcommittee of council of parliament is on behalf of Iramoko Marae Te Tawera Hapu. Like our tribe, Ngāti awa and all those that have spoken before me in relation to this, others have. I recognise Natalie Coates, my cousin Brad Harmy from Ngāti Hokopu, Ngāti Wharepaia, and our position is similar to them, that we believe that the Treaty of Waitangi Principles Bill contravenes the spirit and which our ancestors established the Tiriti o Waitangi. The Tiriti o Waitangi also, as we recognise, is premised, Mr. Chairman, with the Wakaputanga, and we acknowledge that. That too is the founding document, both the Tiriti o Waitangi and the Wakaputanga. Now, we believe that there's only one position to take as far as the Tawera is concerned, that we reject the Principles Bill outright, but we recommend the Select Committee to consider that actually the Treaty of Waitangi doesn't need any definition, it doesn't need any translation from the current translation given from the Act Party. We believe that the translation and the essence of Te Tiriti o Waitangi is understood by our ancestors, and I want to acknowledge all my ancestors that signed it, the Wakaputanga, Pōmare, Rewa, and my ancestor Poroto and Te Rama Pukura. The definition and their understanding is the translation and the understanding of how Te Tiriti o Waitangi is understood. We believe that the 1840 definition of Te Tiriti o Waitangi is the only definition that should be considered by the Select Committee. We also believe that this issue would be a non-issue if the Te Tiriti o Waitangi itself was passed in statute as the constitution for the whole of Aotearoa, New Zealand. So it's important that any principles or any definitions beyond that, both past and now, really contravenes and is really quite detrimental to the true translation of what it means to us. So we recommend for the Select Committee to consider seriously that the Te Tiriti o Waitangi in its entirety, what our ancestors knew, both Māori and Pākehā, the translation of 1840 is the only understanding, that should be the statute, that should be put right into Parliament immediately, and from there, all the other issues that we face today as a nation will be a non-issue. This is important. Te Tawera recognises that the Tiriti o Waitangi is a relationship between Hapu, Rangatira to King Charles. It recognises the relationship between the Hapu and the Rangatira to the Governor-General, and then also the Prime Minister and all the ministers within Parliament. In fact, the treaty partnership really sits at a higher level in Parliament itself. We believe that the Hapu, the voice of our nation, that the Hapu have the mandate, as was set down in the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, to represent whānau, Hapu, marae. And in the modern day context also, tangata tiriti, there's no tangata tiriti without tangata whenua, and tangata whenua without tangata tiriti. So there's really importance of us working together, making these decisions together, sitting down, from the very outset and developing what we believe is the appropriate engagement process for us as tangata whenua and tangata tiriti. I believe that this process does have a positive approach to it, that it actually has consciously awoken 5 million people throughout our country, and it's really got everyone supporting each other. There's 300,000 submissions that have come forward, so there hasn't been, in our point of view, a negative approach completely. It actually has stimulated people to consider actually the importance of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and what it means not only to us as Te Tawera, what it means to whānau Hapuniwi and our communities. We believe that Te Tiriti o Waitangi is the only founding document of this country, and that even though there's many versions under international law, Mr. Chairman, that it's the tangata whenua language that stands as the treaty to be recognised in this context. So we're very pleased to be part of the discussion today. We're very pleased to put forward our views And as I said again, in summary, the relationship really for us is about us and the King of England, us and the Governor General, us and the Prime Minister and the members of Parliament. And that actually goes right across the whole relationships with us and the Crown in all facets in relation to the kāwanatanga. However, the relationship is also about how we work together. The relationships also recognise what we do in this modern day context, and Article 2 for us represents how we protect what we have now in Aotearoa, which each of us have kaitiaki-tanga responsibilities. I say this because the land tenure is quite different. 180 years ago was completely Māori ownership, Māori kaitiaki-tanga. Today, there's Māori owned land, Mr. Chairman. There's individual certificates of title, and there's also Crown land. So we have to really sit down together and look at how we protect and look after that, the kaitiaki-tanga and all those different translations in land and how we look after that together for Māori, whānau hapu iwi, marae, and all New Zealanders. I think that the last point there in the Article 3, Mr. Chairman, talks about the importance of yes, British citizen rights, but it also enables the rights of tangata whenua to be respected and recognised. And from there, the development of that into the modern day context. But that leads between tangata whenua and tangata tiriti, and how we need to define that together. I acknowledge Bishop Pompelia that he actually inserted the last article of the treaty, which is Article 4, Mr. Chairman. And actually, it's quite a good article as well, because it recognises spiritual freedom. So the Tawera Hapu acknowledges our spiritual freedom, how we express that. That is completely up to us and how we do that. And also customary rights, the right for all, including us, to express our identity in terms of who we are. So Te Tawera Hapu, we need to go beyond the Treaty Settlements Bill. In conclusion, we need to breathe and live and think and be Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We've been discussing this for a long time. And I think, it's a good thing if we discuss things, but then at the end of the day, how do we then implement the discussion so that it becomes transformative and helps us as a nation to train ourselves so that we know the history, but then transform in terms of the training of that knowledge and that history so that we can make real changes for future generations beyond us. So Te Tawera submits its position today, recognises the hard work that this committee has, but we are excited that there are so many New Zealanders, whānau hapu niwi, leaders, people from the community grassroots who are all participating, Mr. Chairman, in the importance of this discussion. So it will have an impact on us today. And, what we do now will establish the next foundation in terms of the importance of the Tiriti o Waitangi in future generations, Mr. Chairman, that will follow after us. Ko hau te tiriti ko hau, ko koe, te tiriti ko koe. Simply, I am the treaty and the treaty is me, te tiriti o Waitangi. And of course, for us, tiriti tangata whenua, tangata tiriti, the treaty is also you and us working together. We can't have the spirit of the Treaty of Waitangi in full action and full implementation without our treaty partners and us working together. Nō reira, kia ora tātou katoa.
Well, kia ora koutou. Thank you for your submission. We're a little bit over time now, so we don't have time for questions, but just on behalf of the committee, thank you for sticking with us and allowing us to get you on board this afternoon to provide your submission. We do thank you for your presence and your time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Kia ora.
Thanks. Okay, we've now got a submission from Wayne Knox. Wayne is in the room with us. Kia ora, Wayne. Tēnā koe, thank you for being with the committee. We've got you for a 5-minute session this afternoon, so I will hand over to you to begin your presentation.
Ka pai. Wea no tēnā koutou e te pai whakarongo. E kawe nei te kaupa whakahira-hira. Mr. Chair, I am here today with a heart open to the possibility that one day we, the people of Aotearoa, will realise our innate kotahitanga, our innate oneness as a nation. I'm here today in the spirit and the promise of Te Tiriti. I'm here today to share some whakaaro. Personally, I actually endorse the purported objective of this bill, which is to encourage and promote dialogue about the role of Te Tiriti in our constitutional arrangements. However, I don't agree that this bill is the appropriate vehicle to take that forward. Instead, we should be looking to the example of the work that Moana Jackson led with Matike Mai and the series of hui that were held across the country to promote understanding, to promote awareness, conversations that were led by our young people. And I believe that it's there where this conversation needs to start, on our marae, in our libraries, in our war memorial walls, in our RSAs, everywhere where people, where ordinary Kiwis, New Zealanders, tangata whenua, hoki, of our beautiful country gather. One good outcome of this bill has been, there's been dialogue, and it's really highlighted the lack of awareness within our communities, both Māori and non-Māori. Mr. Chair, in the work that I do, I'm privileged to work with tangata whenua-led organisations who support our whānau who are unhoused, who are inadequately housed. And whilst we may have the luxury to have ideological debates about the equality of rights and what a race-based policy might look like, our people on the ground suffer. And they're suffering under some of the current policies of this government. The highest proportion of people who are homeless in this country are young Māori, are Māori children. And discussion around race-based policies are unhelpful, even though they are part of the justification for this bill. The simple fact of the matter is that we don't need race-based policies. We need policies that work. We need a bit of common sense instead of a polarized debate around ideology. I want to share some of the values that we work by in the mahi that we do. Whakapapa. Whakapapa acknowledges the innate interconnectedness of us all. Tikanga. Tikanga is about doing things in a way that serves the greater good. And finally, mana motuhake, working in ways that promote our sacred sovereignty of self. And I believe that when we can talk about Te Tiriti in the context of some of those values, and safe spaces where we acknowledge all perspectives, unlike some of the spaces that are being, in which this bill is currently being discussed, there's a strong feeling of being unsafe. So if we create those safe spaces where all perspectives can be heard, and all perspectives can be recognised, I believe we'll see progress. Until then, we will see continued division. I'm not sure how I'm going for time, Mr. Chair. I know you're running over, so I'm happy to leave it there.
You're almost right on time, Wayne. We've got about 20 seconds left. So what I'll do is I'll just thank you for providing your submission this afternoon and just acknowledge on behalf of the committee for you taking the time to be with us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We've thank you. Do we have any of the other ones that we skipped over? Do we have Sandra or Ngati Kapi?
No, we don't.
No.
So I think both of them have some issues.
No, right. Okay. So what we can do is we've got options. I think we've got the crew from Te Wakaiti Trust here. So I'll offer you the option. We can have a break for 15 minutes, or we can invite you to present now I know whether you might have some people online who are wanting to tune in and watch at 3:15, or if you're wanting to start now, we could start now and bring you early. Entirely in your hands. Because we are about 15 minutes ahead. Absolutely. So what we'll do is we'll break till 3:15 and we'll be back with Te Wakaiti Trust, who will be here in person. So we'll see you all back at 1:15. we'll get you settled in. We do have to wait till bang on 1:15, but we'll kick off straight away after then. If you want any of your young ones up at the table, tipped over to 1:15, so we'll reconvene the meeting now. And joining us at the table, we've got representatives from the Wakaiti Trust, and we've got Kaitiana Wilson and Bridget Corcoran, is that how I say your last name? Kia ora koutou, and your whanaunga as well. So welcome to the committee. Thank you for being with us this afternoon and for being with us for the last hour or so. We've got you before us for 10 minutes this afternoon, so I'll hand over to you to start your presentation.
Kia ora. I ngā mana, i ngā reo, rei rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko tai mai mātou i te marumaru o te ahu mairangi. Ki te kōrero Tawera o te pita Torokiwi. Te Wakaiti Trust acknowledges Te Tiriti o Waitangi as a founding document of Aotearoa New Zealand. We are seeking to formalise this in the current rewrite of our original deed, first drafted in 1976. Our Te Wakaiti community carries a long tradition of standing in solidarity with tangata whenua. Our founding tūpuna include Suzanne Aubert, mother of ngā whaia tapu Puaroha, the Sisters of Compassion, who in 1892 established a convent and worked for many years with Māori in Hiruharama up the Wanganui River. James K. Baxter, a Pākehā and one of Aotearoa's most admired and controversial poets, who built a community at Hiruharama for young Māori and Pākehā who were living at the margins of society. Norman Kirk, our first Prime Minister, born in Aotearoa, under his government, Māori land law was reformed and the Waitangi Tribunal Act 1975 passed. And lastly, Thomas Merton, a Trappist monk whose extensive writing focused on pacifism, social justice and spirituality. The Trust have used their teachings and Te Paipera Tapu as guides on our bicultural journey. The awareness and commitment of the Trust to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi has grown over the decades in step with many others across the motu. There are currently 4 generations of ainga, families and whānau in our hapori, including artists, authors, bankers, builders, developers, doctors, kaumātua, lawyers, mokopuna, nurses, parents, plumbers, public servants, researchers, and many more. All of this enabled by good faith partnerships between tangata whenua and tangata tiriti, and a deep belief that we are far better together than divided. Today, our bicultural marae, located in Paitu Mokai, Featherston, is a base for trust activities. It is a base for supportive and safe gatherings for our community and a resource for the local community. We acknowledge mana whenua, Ngati Kahununu ki Wairarapa and Rangitane ki Wairarapa. It is their manaakitanga that sees many of our tamariki and mokopuna with a physical and spiritual connection to this precious land. We are truly humbled that a number of our community are buried in the whenua at Te Wakaiti having toiled in the service of faith, papatuanuku, and those less fortunate.
Well, it is a privilege to live in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and to have the opportunity to actively participate in our democracy through our appearance at the Select Committee today. It is disappointing that the Treaty Principles Bill is what brings us here. The Te Wakaiti Trust believes the bill is profoundly flawed and a damaging piece of legislation. It is opposed by the Trust. Others more experienced and learned in our history and the meaning and interpretation of the articles of Te Tiriti have described the bill as a distorted, partial and inaccurate reading of Te Tiriti. Patently, any kind of national conversation based on such a document is not needed. Equally clearly, since its introduction, the reaction of the public to this bill has demonstrated that it is not wanted. The bill goes to the heart of our constitutional arrangements. For that reason alone, its introduction by the ACT Party with the support of coalition partners, but without reference or consultation with Māori, was dishonest, cynical and disrespectful at best. In his speech at the first reading of the bill, Mr. Seymour was very enthusiastic about the bill democratising the principles of Te Tiriti. He is concerned that in the 50 years the principles have been developed, discussed and applied by a myriad of bodies, including multiple governments of which he has been a part, it all seems to have happened outside the purview of Parliament. The bill, he says, will now allow for Parliament's input and give everyone a say through a national referendum to bring it into law. The irony of Mr. Seymour's plaintive cry for democracy is that in the last election only 16 months ago, when he and the ACT Party campaigned on these very matters, they received just over 8% of the vote. That is most strikingly democracy in action. Sadly, the National Party has been willing, through a coalition agreement which prioritises political power ahead of good governance, to expend its political capital in indulging not only this divisive and damaging legislation, but a significant number of other legislative initiatives that undermine the principles of Te Tiriti and racial harmony in the motu. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. We ask that the committee do the right thing now and recommend that the bill be rejected in its entirety.
Waihoa e te toi poto, kawa i te toi roa. Let us be drawn together, not pulled apart. The former MP, Dr. Isaac Featherston, wrote, "The Māoris are dying out. Our plain duty as good, compassionate colonists is to smooth the dying pillow. Then history will have nothing to reproach us with. Let's repurpose that pillow as a tangata matatini, a connected people, many faces, for a bill that by many accounts is already dead. And let's focus our energy instead on seizing those many opportunities that our nation has in front of us. Nō reira, apati hono tātai hono, te hongo mate ki te hongo mate, apati hono tātai hono, te hongo ora ki te hongo ora, toi tū te tiriti."
Well, kia ora koutou. Thank you for your submission. I've just noticed that we had you scheduled for 5 minutes and I inadvertently gave you 10, but I'm not going to take it off you. We'll finish this session and we'll go to some questions. We'll go to a question from Huhana London.
Tēnā koutou, ngā trahiti o Te Wakaiti, koutou mō kai pātea, me te mihi nui ki a koe takutai, hei whakakanohi tō whakapapa me ngā hononga ki nei o ngā whanaunga. whānau, I want to acknowledge you having your babies in the room. It's beautiful seeing them vaguely being interested in making history. But it's important that our babies are involved and understand, what's occurring in the country, and bringing them into the whare warms my heart. So thank you for that. Keen to talk with you or understand your thinking in terms of social cohesion and the way with which the Treaty Principles Bill undermines that important work that you do in the community as hapu iwi, as tangata tiriti and tangata whenua, because you're coming from a rural New Zealand perspective, and what does that look like? Because you've been working for a long time as in the mahi tahi space. Do you think that this bill has degraded and undermined some of those efforts that we've built over time?
Absolutely. I think it poses a question that doesn't need to be asked. The principles of Te Tiriti have been long discussed. It has been that unifying feature of our nation. It is foundational to us, two sovereigns coming together and forging a path together. This bill has absolutely caused division.
Thanks, folks. Look, that's drawing us to a close of the 10-minute session. So just on behalf of the committee, thank you all for being with us and for making the trip over the hill and joining us today. We really do appreciate your time with us.
Tēnā koe.
Thanks for your Right, we'll go to our submission. Next submission is online, and it's going to be from the team at the State Sector Committee of the PSA. And joining us is Jane, Griffin, Tom, Rowan, and Andrea from. So Tom, thank you. We've got you on screen. I will leave it in your hands to take it away from your colleagues, but we've got you for 10 minutes this afternoon. So I'll hand over to either you or Andrea.
Kia ora, thank you. I'll start. I'm just checking I can be heard.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Firstly, we would like to acknowledge the breadth of expertise which has been arranged against this bill. It has been heartening to see such a varied group come together over this issue, and in particular we wish to tautoko the kōrero fellow submitters from the Public Service Association. Secondly, we want to thank the members of the committee for allowing us this time to speak to our submission. We also acknowledge the extraordinary hard work of the staff of Parliamentary Services in running this select committee, which is set to be one of the most publicly engaged in history. Thirdly, we would like to acknowledge Te Atiawa a Taranaki Whānui as mana whenua of Parimata Aotearoa. Just check, Jane,
Jane was with us and she's dropped out.
I might just carry on, then we were going to tag team, but I'll just carry on in that case. We represent the State Sector Committee of Te Pukenga Here Tikanga Mahi, the Public Service Association. Jane Griffin represents the Women's Network on the State Sector Committee, which represents 63,000 female members of more than 96,000 members overall of the Public Service Association of New Zealand. The State Sector Committee represents some 12,000 kaimahi around the motu from 167 different organisations. It is from these members that we derive our mana to speak on this bill today. We represent a diverse slice of Aotearoa's public service. Our members work across Aotearoa's public sector, from meat inspectors to blood technicians, airport security, emergency services, our science community, and some of the country's largest public organisations charged with delivering services to New Zealanders, often in areas like housing and education where Māori have historically been disadvantaged. Our members also cover uniquely Māori organisations, such as those specifically tasked with stewarding taonga such as Māori land and Te Reo Māori. The State Sector Committee has provided a written submission and we take this as read. We wish to speak in opposition to this bill and to address particular concerns we have regarding the effect this bill has had and is likely to have on the public service in Aotearoa. Nā tauroro, nā takuroro, ka ora ai te iwi. With your food basket and my food basket, the people will thrive. This bill seeks to simplify and undermine the complexity of our workers' lives, heritages, and futures.
Sorry, Tom, just a second. I'll just ask Diana or Jane if you can mute your screen. Just because we're getting feedback. Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Apologies. Jane, are you okay to take over? I was sort of picking your part there. Do you want me to keep going? You're on mute. Sorry, Jane.
Unmute now, Jane.
I'll unmute. Are you able
no,
to?
Jane, I'll have to unmute Jane, please.
Tom continue, please.
Would it?
Jane, you'll have to mute your, sorry, Jane, you won't be able to participate, but you'll, what's happening is your audio is feeding back into your microphone and it's creating a loop for the system. So unfortunately, you won't be able to participate. So I'll hand it back to Tom.
Apologies, we'll just box on there. We object to the way this bill affects women in Māori, and particularly in respect of our workers' rights and the delivery of good public services. Many of us in our whānau are tied into our own mixed Māori and Pākehā heritage with all their complex filial alliances and challenges. The partnership and reciprocity brought about by Te Tiriti o Waitangi and its 1835 forebear Te Whakaputanga o Te Rangatiratanga o Nu Tireni provides a space both including and beyond legalism into which we can speak and where our workers' voices can be heard. This voice is currently threatened. So many of us now understand the power and intention of these documents to transcend the intergenerational struggles of both Māori and Pākehā. The real and mature discussion following our hikoi must ensure we protect the rights enshrined under Te Tiriti and understand the subtle differences in meaning between versions, manage within this ambiguity and secure our whenua and moana with the rongo to which Dame Anne Salmon refers and which was originally intended by Queen Victoria. A rigid legislative framework dishonours our diverse heritage. Such a system fails to acknowledge the loss of life that has occurred to this point. It will create further barriers to the redress of legal confiscation of lands, ongoing difficulties for our people in our poorly funded health and education systems, where cost-cutting brings about short-sighted solutions. The only thing the Treaty Principles Bill will staunch is the hope we must generate to go beyond the failures of equity in our country. Fear-mongering over co-governance does not honour the complexities of the discussions that need to be ongoing. Already, our first female Prime Minister has called the progress in relationships, quote, delicate and, quote, fragile. We need to notice that these are words we might apply to fabric or a precious artwork and its ongoing care. In this case, the fabric is our society. We grew up in our unions learning that if things were right for Māori, they would be right for all. We must now honour our commitment to he ara hau, the pathway forwards, whether this be through conserving the whenua and moana at a time of global climate crisis, supporting the broadening of te reo Māori for our rangatahi, or making a meaningful and long-lasting peace in Aotearoa. It is disappointing but not unsurprising that this bill should be the product of the most anti-worker government in over 30 years. We recognise that the Prime Minister has stated on record many times that this bill will not become law. However, that does not prevent this bill from doing real harm to workers. What we have heard repeatedly from our Māori members is the frustration they face in once again having to defend who they are in the workplace. We have often heard, particularly from members of the party primarily responsible for this bill, how awful it can be to continue to fight through tears performing your day job in a work environment which strips away your dignity and attacks you for who you are. Indeed, the Children's Minister wept bitter tears last year in describing Parliament as an unsafe workplace. How many tears does the ACT Party today shed for Māori public sector workers who find themselves in that unenviable position? This is the reality of many Māori public sector workers who are required to be politically neutral in the workplace, but have had their identity, their way of life, their very essence politicised by this bill and by the actions of this government. Te Tiriti guarantees the rights of Māori to be authentically and unapologetically Māori in their places of work, for public services to be shaped in ways which benefit the communities they intend to target and which provide dignity. Te Tiriti is the foundation and guide for delivering policies and practices which achieve positive outcomes for Māori. The principles of this bill on the surface may sound appealing, dressed as they are in the 18th century principles and words of the Enlightenment. However, they strip away critical context necessary for defining the relationship between the state and Māori. Over the decades, successive governments from either side of the aisle have recognised the inequality of outcomes experienced by Māori in this country. Those successive governments have often sought to remedy that inequality through investment in targeted public services. This current government has done its best to demolish that progress, regardless of the trajectory of this bill. This bill would open the door for widespread disestablishment of critical public services which seek to remedy the inequality of outcomes experienced by many groups in this country. We protest this not only for the danger this would pose to our union members, but for the damage this would do to the public at large. We have already seen this government dismantle critical public services while letting those with the most contribute the least. The dismantling of Māori health authorities and the axing of support for Māori education within the public service shows the contempt this government has for real equality, for equality where people are uplifted, where cultural gulfs are bridged, and where outcomes are put ahead of dogma and ideology. We grew up learning that the personal is political, and the actions of each of us makes that difference. By 2043, 31% of our people will be Māori and Pacifica, and it is into this intergenerational place we must allow Te Tiriti o Waitangi to speak. The State Sector Committee of Te Pukenga Here Tikanga Mahi continues to oppose this bill and the harm it has already done. We ask this government to not only vote down this bill, but to affirm its support for critical public services which address inequalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We've got time for a question or two. I'll go to Todd Stevenson. Todd, you're either on mute or your audio is not coming through, mate. No, sorry, Todd, we don't have any audio for you at the moment.
That any
There you
better?
go. There you go.
That better?
Yep. Yes, we can hear you.
No, can't hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can hear me. Okay, great. Sorry, I think I've stopped up. I think. Just quickly, does the PSA then think that public services should be delivered differently based on ancestry?
The Public Service Association believes that public services should be delivered in a way that targets and best and most efficiently addresses the inequalities that they seek to address. If that means that we need to target Māori with Māori health services because we recognise that Māori are disadvantaged in our health service, then yes.
Okay, thank you, Tom. That's probably all the time we've got, unfortunately, Tracy. Sorry for that. So thank you, Tom, Jane, and Andrea. Sorry, Jane, we couldn't get you on the call as well just because of that audio, but we appreciate you all being with us this afternoon to speak to your submission.
Kia, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go now to, I think we're going to try and get Sandy O'Neil in at this one. So Sandy is going to join us. Hopefully we can get this one working. Sandy, thank you for sticking with us and for being here this afternoon. I've got you on the list for 5 minutes this afternoon, so I'll hand over to you to start your presentation.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Sandy O'Neil aho. Thank you for reading and considering my submission and the opportunity to speak to you today. I reiterate, I am opposed to this bill, both the process and the content. I think the whole thing is insidious and misleading because it's based on a set of false premises. Today, I want to highlight matters of power and social relationships arising from the draft bill. I have some challenges for you folks who are members of this committee and your members of parliament. So both those roles, and of course, your holders of the power in this process. Looking at Te Tiriti, it was a bargain made for respectful relationships between Māori and non-Māori. It provides a foundation for political and other relationships in our country, places emphasis on tino rangatiratanga, and guarantees certain rights and agency to Māori. It cannot be changed. And yet, if passed, this bill will in effect impose change upon the meaning and the purpose of Te Tiriti. It's presented as a simplified set of principles derived from Te Tiriti, but I know you've all heard and read many informed arguments about how the bill's draft principles compare to the articles of Te Tiriti and the intent and meaning of the treaty. You've seen and heard that the comparisons just don't match up. You also know that the English language and te reo versions of Te Tiriti just do not match up. International best practice would give preference to the Indigenous language version in these situations, and yet it's clear the bill relies on a disputed translation, and the bill inserts principles that are not derived from the text of Te Tiriti. It also ignores the intentions and historical context of what the parties were trying to do when they first signed it. Most importantly, we can see that the draft principles 1 and 2 remove and ignore the concept of tino rangatiratanga, not even mentioned. Draft principle 3 undermines existing rights already reserved in Te Tiriti. So please, committee members, I want you to ask yourselves, what does Tino Rangatira-tanga mean or represent? Are we enhancing or diminishing Tino Rangatira-tanga if we accept the simplistic set of proposed principles? Are we allowing a misleading notion about equality to gain root at the cost of genuine attempts at equity? I'd say yes. Are we providing a platform for rights to be gained or eroded? Eroded, I'd say. And whose rights would take precedence under this set of false principles? I leave you to answer that question. In my view, the answers to these questions paint a backward step for our society. And as I already said, I feel like the whole thing is insidious. I think we're having the wrong conversation around this bill because it does nothing to enhance understanding of te tiriti and nothing to address equality, equity, power imbalances, and so on. Yet it has done plenty to upset social relations and create arguments that will not be resolved by going ahead with these or any other similar proposals in the future. I would rather see the government spend time and effort on re-establishing opportunities for education, particularly at the community level, on just what te tiriti actually says, so that we can all better understand our own history and respect the legal framework and other institutions that give us meaning to te tiriti. There's a lot more that could be said about the power imbalances that underlie this bill, but I'd finish by saying that I feel this bill is an attack on Tino Rangatira-tanga and on the mana of the Treaty of Waitangi, not to mention an attack on the citizens of this country. I'm trusting you, as members of that committee, to make a genuine critique of why so many people are opposed to this bill, including the huge numbers who took to the streets across the Motu recently. So 2 more asks. Please, will you review the recommendations and conclusions that I've written in my submission? And finally, I just have to say, you know that this bill does not meet the tests for good law. I've probably used up my 5 minutes, so thank you. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you,
Also,
Sandy.
James, just thank you for slotting me in at a time later than I was originally scheduled.
No, thank you, Sandy. You finished right on 5 minutes before you unnecessarily thanked us for getting you in later on. So no, thank you for your submission. Well received. And we just appreciate you your patience as we try to sort you out and get you slotted in with those technical issues. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
We'll go to our submission now from, hopefully we have the Tangikaroro Kaitiaki group. And joining us is Bronson Perich.
E te rongo pai koutou ki au, can you hear me?
We can. Bronson, if you can turn your camera on, that would be helpful. Thank you. Right, thanks for joining us, Bronson. We've got you for 5 minutes this afternoon, so I'll quickly hand over to you to take it away.
Tēnā koutou e te komiti. Tāku nei kōrero he kōrero mai te ohu kaitiaki o Tangikaroro. Mihi atu kia koutou e whakarongo mai ana, mihi atu anō mo te pānui pai o tō tātou tukunga tuhi I hoa atu nei kia koutou. So I'll carry on the presumption that the submission has already been read, and I'll provide some bullet points, which may be the, I guess, the genesis of questioning. It will be a reo rua presentation. I'll fluctuate between both languages. Ka tima tahau nā runga I te kōrero o tā hiruini parata, tōna kōrero I ai e whakaheke mai ki tūwhare toa nei. He hara te kōtahitanga I te whakaaro kōtahi, ko te kōtahitanga kē, te whakaeke ki runga I te waka kōtahi. Unity is not thinking the same. Unity is when we are all on the same waka. And that I attribute that to Sir Selwyn Parata when he visited tūwhare toa. Me kōrero tātou mo te tiriti. The Treaty of Waitangi is a binding document between 2 nations, the Confederation of the United Tribes of New Zealand, also the Hapu that had yet to join said confederation, and the British Crown. This bill, under the pretense of defining treaty principles, fundamentally misinterprets the treaty's intent, erases Māori sovereignty, and distorts history. Let's be clear, this is not about fairness or clarity. It is a direct attempt to diminish Māori rights and Te Tiriti's legal standing. The treaty was built on partnership, protection and participation, yet this bill removes Māori voices, denies historical injustice and undermines the treaty. We stand by the stance that Māori never ceded sovereignty. The idea that 90,000 Māori would cede sovereignty to 5,000 colonists in 1840 would be the same concept as trying to convince us that the PM of Australia would cede his sovereignty of his Commonwealth of Australia to Norfolk Island. The bill uses the flawed English version as its foundation, a version that only 7.1% of the signatories signed. The majority signed the treaty in Te Reo Māori, and that number is approximately 500. This bill relies on misleading claims about equality, governance, and treaty settlements. It's designed to create division while failing to acknowledge past injustices and present disparities. The ACT Party claims this bill promotes one law for all, but true equality recognises past injustices and ensures equitable outcomes. Māori lost in immense land, resources and economic opportunities, yet this bill treats all groups as if we started on equal footing. An example, an anecdote if you will. Imagine if you sold your $1 million home under duress for $50 and then years later you were told that you don't deserve compensation because we're all one country, we're all New Zealanders and you need to get over it. The reality is that Māori land loss, wealth disparity and cultural erosion were engineered by the Crown. And this bill seeks to unlock those injustices in place. Māori granted the Crown Kāwanatanga the ability to govern settlers, not to rule over Māori. The bill implies Māori are just another ethnic group, ignoring that we are then, as we were then, and we are now, we are a sovereign Māori nation, working in concert with the Crown, according to our binding agreement. It disregards the bill that is the legal principle of contra preferentum, which has been spoken of. This bill will change the foundation of future treaty claims. It contradicts New Zealand's obligations under international law, in particular UNDRIP, which I recall was signed by Sir John Key. This is a dangerous and an unjust bill. Here's why. The bill seeks to redefine how Te Treaty is defined and applied. In fact, we are calling it a de facto rewriting of Te Treaty. It removes protections and redress mechanisms for Māori, blocks future legal claims for justice, and it could potentially destroy 5 decades of Crown precedents. We're calling for a strengthening of our constitution, not by weakening. First, all people need to be educated on the true extent of loss to Māori. We need to get our story straight. One of the reasons that we are unable to speak as one people is because we are still arguing over what happened. We need to get our national story straight. If we were to put a dollar figure on the loss to Māori, we put it at $351 trillion. So if New Zealand was taken to the International Court of Justice, that would be the approximate owed. This is an unpayable amount that would inflict unnecessary financial injustice on all New Zealanders for generations to come. So what we're asking Parliament to do is to reject this bill completely. It's fundamentally flawed. Please commit to treaty-based governance at all levels that respect te tino rangatiratanga o te Māori, Māori sovereignty, and to continue our redress mechanisms to address historical injustices. The quantum of injustice in time cannot simply be erased because it is inconvenient. To do so would be to create more injustice. We do not move forward as a nation by pretending bad things didn't happen. We move forward by ensuring that justice is upheld across time and not sacrificed in the name of convenient unity. I'm going to leave with 2 sayings, one from our tūwharetoa ancestor Tamutu and one from Potato Te Whero. Both speak to the issues at hand. Aotearoa e kia āta whakateri I te waka. Kei pariparia e te tai mōne nehu, o ti rā te tai kaikiri, te tai kuare, me te tai wāwāhi tō tararua. My fellow New Zealanders, let us steer our waka with caution and care, lest the waves of racism, ignorance and division overcome us. I added in a few modern terms to make that relevant. Potato, the first Māori king, who was seen as an affront to the sovereignty of Britain, said this: Ko tahi te kōwha o te ngira, e kuhuna ai te miro mā, te miro whero, me te miro pango. I muri au, kia mau ki te ture, te whakapono me te aroha, hei aha te aha, hei aha te aha. There is only one eye of the needle through which all threads must pass. The white, the red, the black. After me, hold fast to the law, to faith, and to love, no matter what, no matter what. Unity is not about erasing difference. Unity
Sorry,
respects the
Bronson,
truth of our
sorry.
history.
Sorry to interrupt, Bronson, but we're now a couple of minutes over time, so I'll have to ask you to bring your submission to a conclusion.
Done.
Okay, all good. Thank you for being with the committee. We do appreciate your time. Okay, folks, we're going to move on to submission now from Tiwhane Te Kanapu. We've got a team in front of us. Sorry, I don't have any names before us, so I'll hand over to you to introduce yourselves, and I'll just start the timer for you now.
Kia ora, my name is Tiwhane Te Kanapu. This is my partner Fiona. I'm here to oppose this bill. First of all, in komiti me nā kaimahi, kia ora koutou, ki nā kapa I matatini, kia mau te wehi, karawhiua, ki nā whānau I roto kākahi, me nā kaitiaki mā, nā mihi nui ki a koutou, kia tū, kia kaha. Today I want to discuss, I assume that my written submission has been read, so if we can take it as that. One thing that I would like to add is that I have two daughters. They are tūhoi as well, so I'd just like to acknowledge them. Today I want to discuss what I meant in paragraph 5 of my written submission, which is where I said, I have to ask myself why the heck the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill has got as far as it has, and I'm left wondering what the jingos is wrong with our leaders in government supporting such divisive and oppressive legislation. Now, there's a distinction between the Crown's treaty obligations and the role of responsible leadership in upholding them. This is especially important in light of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill, I'll call it the bill, which undermines the Crown's duties and represents an irresponsible use, in my submission, of power. The Treaty of Waitangi was signed between Māori rangatira and the British Crown. It wasn't signed between private individuals. This is a constitutional commitment that binds the government and by extension all ministers of the Crown. Now this is crucial. Individual New Zealanders never signed the treaty. The Crown did. Individual New Zealanders do not hold the governing authority. The Crown does. The treaty does not impose obligations on individual New Zealanders. It imposes, for these purposes, obligations on the Crown. For example, the government must protect and fund Te Reo Māori, but individuals aren't required to speak it, fund it or support it. The government must provide redress for land confiscations, but land that has been passed into private ownership because of wrongs that the Crown has done, there's no expectation or no demand on those private landowners to return the land that they now benefit back to Māori control. The government must consult Māori on policies that affect Māori rights, but there's no obligation whatsoever on individual New Zealanders to do the same. So, and this distinction matters because when ministers of the Crown exercise power, they do so on behalf of the Crown. They don't do so as individuals. And that leadership must reflect the Crown's treaty obligations, which include partnership, active protection, redress, and recognition of tino rangatiratanga, as an example. Now, there's a couple of important background matters that I want to raise here about the Crown's obligation. The Crown doesn't have a body to kick or a soul to damn. It is a legal and constitutional construct that is essential to the governance of Aotearoa New Zealand. Because there is no body to kick or soul to damn, the activities of the Crown, that the Crown participates in, must be performed by human agents, must be performed by people. And these human agents are ministers of the Crown. One of the fundamental aspects of acting on behalf of the Crown is ensuring that the honour of the Crown is preserved and enhanced at all times. It's about mana, the mana of the Crown. So when we were looking at some of the things that the Crown has actually said, promised that it would do in terms of Te Reti Waitangi, there were 4. So partnership means that ministers must engage in good faith with Māori and ensure meaningful consultation. Active protection means requires safeguarding Māori interests, and that includes land, culture, te reo Māori, and many, many other things. Redress obligates ministers to acknowledge and address past wrongs and injustices. Recognition of tino rangatiratanga means that the Crown must respect Māori self-determination where that affects Māori affairs. A responsible Minister of the Crown understands that leadership is not about personal preference or about political convenience. It is about upholding constitutional principles. Now, the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill is an example of irresponsible leadership in my submission. Instead of honouring the Crown's obligations, it seeks to erase them from legislation. Supporters claim that the treaty principles are vague or grant Māori special treatment. In reality, the principles clarify the Crown's duty and ensure fair treatment. So it undermines responsible leadership or governance in 4 ways. It ignores constitutional responsibility. The treaty was signed by the Crown. The government cannot unilaterally rewrite it or disregard it. Second, it prioritises politics over long-term stability. Thirdly, it weakens the Crown's credibility. Fourthly, it creates a social and legal risk. Responsible leadership is different to what we've got here. Instead of legislating unilaterally, there would be engagement with Māori. Instead of fueling resentment, there would be education of the public about what the obligations of the Crown and Māori are to one another. Instead of dismantling constitutional commitments, they would honour them. I recognise that I've gone over time. I can bring it to a close there, and I thank you very much for your time and for the committee's time.
Thank you, Tiwhane. Kia ora. Thank you for your submission. You got a lot of content out in the 5.5 minutes, so well done. And we just appreciate you being with us this afternoon for the submission.
Kia ora.
We'll go to our next submission. This is from the Manukau Urban Authority, or MUMA, and joining us in the room is Tania Tapsell. Sorry, I can't quite get the Indian name. Sorry, Tania. Thanks for joining us, Tania. We've got you before us for 10 minutes this afternoon, so I'll hand over to you to begin.
Sorry, how many?
10.
Thank you. Tēnā koe. Tēnā anō tātou katoa. Ki ngā memo o tēnei whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā anō tātou. My name is Tania Tapsell. I am the CEO of Manukau Urban Māori Authority, otherwise known as MUMA. Our organisation is primarily located in South Auckland. However, we also have residential services in Whangarei and an office in Wellington. So, and we also connect with other organisations right throughout the country. You've got our submission, and expect that you've read our submission. So what I'd like to do today is to first of all, just to reiterate our opposition, MUMA's opposition to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. And then I want to focus on 3 main points. Firstly, how our organisation, MUMA, as an urban Māori organisation, values the treaty and how we give expression, practical expression to the treaty in all that we stand for and all that we do. I also want to address the problem of the myths that have been created around the treaty and the treaty rhetoric, which are most unfortunate, particularly when we're at a time in the governance of this country when we most need clarity around partnerships and relationships between Māori and the Crown and Māori and the government. And the third issue that I want to talk about is why it's important to maintain the conversation around the treaty. I've looked over some of the submissions, and very few actually speak about the importance of why we need to keep talking. And yet, if you were to read a lot of the learned expositions by our top academics, Māori academics and lawyers, they continuously talk about why we need to keep speaking and not talking past each other, but speaking and conversing in a respectful and constructive way around our treaty partnerships, and in particular the rights of Māori under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So to begin with, MUMA, we're in South Auckland. We've been operating for almost 40 years in South Auckland. It's an area where there is high need amongst Māori. There are a significant proportion of our population who are resident in Auckland, well over 80 to 90%. And our organisation has a long track record of not just working within our hapori and within the different Māori organisations, but also with government and Crown entities. Our partnership is salient. It's so important for our organisation to have sound, effective partnerships. This is what the treaty talks about, having a relationship between Māori and the Crown. I know the former judge of the Māori Land Court, Edward Tuhakure Dury, he spoke about how we must continue the conversation and why, as an organisation, we play a pivotal role. During the treaty negotiations around fisheries assets and allocations, we stepped up as an urban Māori organisation and highlighted the problem that colonisation has caused for a considerable number of Māori who cannot identify as their iwi or their hapu identity or affiliation. That was not a reason why they should be restricted or limited in terms of their rights under the treaty. And our organisation stood up for that, as did a number of other Māori organisations in Auckland and across the country. We promote mana motuhake. We put whānau above all else. We don't and cannot support a bill that intentionally strips away the foundation upon which we are built, our society, and particularly Māori whānau. We set up, for example, Radio Wātia to promote Māori culture, our tikanga and our reo, and we continue to do that. The radio stations and the Māori radio stations were set up specifically to maintain and enrich our te reo Māori. Equally important is our role in raising people's awareness about political events and matters that are important to Māori. Māori broadcasting has, over the past 2-3 years in particular, experienced significant diminution of the resources and support from government, and that is, in our view, a dereliction of their duty under the Crown's responsibilities vis-a-vis the Treaty of Waitangi. When we talk about standing strong for our whānau, MUMA supports the treaty in terms of strengthening families and whānau. We value our tikanga and our reo at our marae, and we promote education as a key facilitating or agent to promote growing educational awareness or educational achievement for our rangatahi. These are sorts of things that are important, and we see that the government, in terms of our relationship, our treaty relationship, must continue to support us. In terms of dispelling the myths, what is evident to us is the underpinning and that which is underpinning, the myths that are underpinning and driving this bill. There is a view that Māori receive special privileges under Te Tiriti. We argue against that. We're witnessing an unravelling of significant number of initiatives like Te Whatu Ora, Te Arawhiti, Te Ahu o Te Reo, Iwi Māori partnership boards, and the list goes on. The disestablishment being justified by a view that public services should only cater to, or should cater to all New Zealand, falls well short of the Crown's responsibilities under the treaty. We hear that the view that, or the argument that the government will only support services that that are accessible by all New Zealanders, and only support where there is need. However, Māori present disproportionately with a greater level of need across all the different sector areas. It's a sad and very real situation, which is basically the flip side of the argument that for over 100 years, the public service has failed to meet the real needs in a full sense, those of Māori. Public services weren't designed to meet the needs of Māori. They were designed to meet the needs of governments of the day. A very good example of this is the native schooling system, which effectively suppressed Te Reo Māori and assimilated our children into a Western world that was foreign to them, and their cultural identity for many was effectively erased. That's just some of the examples of how the public service has neglected to fully cater to the needs. So if you use a needs-based argument, the government will continue to fall short of meeting their treaty obligations to Māori, and that is our argument as to why this bill should not proceed. We also are keen for this government to have respectful conversations with Māori. And as I said, there is this myth that we receive special privileges. But I want you all to consider this, and I'm going to give you an analogy. Oops, I'm going to have to be really quick. Imagine two groups. One lives on land and the other on the sea. Excuse me. The land people need a way to travel, so we build them a car. It's perfectly suited to their needs. Now, the sea people also need transport. Instead of designing a boat, we attach features to the car and offer it to them. But no matter how many modifications we make, it's never as effective as a boat. The sea people continue to struggle while the land people travel with ease. The solution is straightforward: build a boat. This isn't special treatment, it's equity. In the context of Aotearoa, Māori-specific initiatives are the boat needed to address systemic inequalities and meet the unique needs of tangata whenua. Far from granting privileges, these initiatives work to level the playing field. By perpetuating the myth of special rights, this bill fosters resentment and divisiveness, undermining social cohesion. It disregards the partnership envisaged in the treaty. We strongly oppose this bill for all of those reasons. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your submission this afternoon. We appreciate you being with us in person and for providing your submission.
Thank you. Go build a boat.
We'll now move to our submission from Walker Sarah Marie. So I'll invite you to the table. We have you for 5 minutes this afternoon. So I'll hand over to you to begin your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Nei rā te mihi atu ki a koutou te komiti whiriwhiri nei. Ko wai tēnei he tangata tiriti ahau, and I'm here to oppose the bill. 2 years ago, I went to an immersion school called Tikanga mo te reo to learn to speak te reo Māori. I learnt Māori in the university system and I knew how that worked, but I wanted to experience a more Māori way of learning through te atarangi. With te atarangi, the first rule is to realise everyone has a different speed of learning. Ko te mea nui, he mana kei te katoa. There's no writing because everything's handed down orally, but you're trained in methods of memorising and you get to work a very ancient part of your human brain. Every day you're reminded to honour your connection with others. Kia ngā kaumaha ki tētahi ki tētahi. In te atarangi, I felt ill-equipped a lot of the time. I realised that in a learning situation, I'm quite good at ensuring my own success, but I don't have all those small, elegant ways of ensuring the success of others. The Pākehā way is to stay quiet when someone else is speaking. So even though I wanted to, I found it hard to join in and call out ka pai or kia kaha to encourage someone when they were making a speech. The Māori way is not always easy for Pākehā. We need to undo some deep training. We make some uncomfortable mistakes. Worst of all, New Zealand's painful history suddenly becomes very alive to us. Nevertheless, I would do it all again in a flash because I grew from the experience and I made wonderful friends. I believe cultural mixing, not cultural amalgamation, has the power to produce something entirely unexpected and wonderful in all of us. My own children are the result of two cultural traditions. On one side, they have my Pākehā story. On the other side, they're Mexican. I refer to Mexican in my written submission because I'm aware of a time in Mexican history when there was a colonial government and an Indigenous sovereignty existing in tandem. In her book, Fifth Son, Camilla Townsend writes about this system which was known as the two republics, dos repúblicos, two self-governing entities that coexisted in Mexico for centuries. One republic was the new system set up by the Spaniards, the other was the old system of the Indigenous. I'm not saying that first contact and colonization wasn't brutal and catastrophic for the Indigenous people of Mexico, but with the two republics, Mexican culture can be seen to flourish. When two strong identities meet and exchange their historical and geographical knowledge, something entirely new will grow up in the intersection. In Mexico, this was a time of new cuisine, new music, spiritual, cultural abundance, everything we think of when we think of the beautiful culture of Mexico. It was around the War of Independence in 1810, the idea of one Mexico suddenly took hold, and the system of two republics was disestablished. With one Mexico, it now seemed counterproductive to encourage Indigenous peoples to speak their own language. No longer could a native person go to court and find a translator. That person would need to speak Spanish. No longer could a native person say she preferred to be educated in the old way. Such a person would need to learn Spanish. Under these circumstances, Indigenous poverty grew in the 19th century and the health and well-being of Indigenous people declined to levels we see in present-day Mexico. If it wasn't for the rise of Māori change makers in recent decades, I think One New Zealand was heading in the same direction. Thankfully, there was a resurgence in Māori culture and Māori language, thanks to the work of many. Any of us can now choose to go to Te Atarangi, send our kids to kohanga reo, kura kaupapa, attend te matatini, watch whakaata Māori. I would like to make one last point. The Treaty of Waitangi, like the two republics of Mexico, works on the principle that there is no reason why a country can't have two ways of governing, two ways of ordering social lives, and two ways of doing things. This bill works on the fear that we will become two separate New Zealands with a membership that is somehow exclusive and based on race. In early Mexico, that was never the case. Interrelationships meant there was a constant flow of Spanish to the Indigenous Republic and Indigenous to the Spanish Republic. There was always a choice. We have the same choice in New Zealand. Just like me attending to Kāinga Motereo, I didn't have to be Māori to go there. I just had to be brave. In a country of choice, we will all be a stronger people for it. We will all have more to chew on. He kai maro. Think of it as a fruit salad instead of a milkshake. Please don't let fear guide you or let fear mongers manipulate you. Kill this bill and let's get on with a good mahi that we've already started and we're already doing.
Thank you, Sarah Marie. Thank you for your submission today. That's the time we have. So on behalf of the committee, I want to acknowledge you for being here, for providing your presentation and for being with us this afternoon. It's been great to have you in the room. Thank you. We're going to have a submission now from Williams family members. So if those in the room want to come up to the table, we'll have to come up to. So thank you all for being with us and for presenting today. We've got you for a 5-minute slot this afternoon, so I'll hand over to you to introduce yourselves into the submission.
Tēnā koutou ina mema o te komiti katoa, kānau te mihi manahau ki a koutou katoa. My name is Martin Williams. I'm here with my cousin Emma and Christian, Christian's wife Nicole, and their daughter Tala, and other members of the Williams whānau online. Firstly, I should explain that this oral submission does not pretend to be on behalf of the Williams family as a whole, but instead those 164 members of the family, of the Williams family signing the written submission we've lodged. Our tūpuna, Henry Williams, played a pivotal role in translating Te Tiriti into Te Reo, and along with his brother William, were active in encouraging the rangatira of Hapu across the North Island to sign Te Tiriti for their protection. We are here today because we feel an obligation to ensure that the promises and guarantees in the treaty, in the manner explained to the rangatira by our tūpuna, are honoured today. Writing in 1847, Henry set out what he had explained to the rangatira as intended by the words he used in the translation. Henry had described Te Tiriti as an act of love on the part of Queen Victoria and as the Magna Carta for Māori. The essence of the bargain was, in Henry's words, a surrender of the right to govern for the preservation of peace and good order to the Crown, i.e. Kawanatanga on the one hand, with the rangatira guaranteed their full rights as chiefs or tino rangatiratanga on the other. The scholarly work of Dr. Ned Fletcher confirms that this explanation and meaning faithfully accords with the Crown's instructions at the time, and indeed those of Governor Hobson to Henry at the time he was asked to prepare Te Tiriti from the English drafts he was given on 4 February 1840. In 2022, the Waitangi Tribunal in the Te Paparahi o Taraki inquiry confirmed that this was also the way Te Tiriti was understood by Māori at the time they signed it, i.e. that the Māori had not ceded untrammelled sovereignty, but instead the governance right inherent to Kawanatanga, which must operate alongside full retention of tino rangatiratanga. Conversely, the Waitangi Tribunal in its report on the Treaty Principles Bill last year found that were it to be enacted, this would be the worst, most comprehensive breach of the treaty in modern times. We agree. The Treaty Principles Bill would effectively rewrite Te Tiriti. It represents a flagrant breach of the solemn compact on which this nation was founded, the guarantee of tino rangatiratanga in particular. The Crown would be seen by Māori to have reneged on the treaty bargain with potentially dire constitutional consequences. Also written in 1847, the following words of William Williams could never be more apposite. Many of us were actively, he said then, were actively engaged in procuring signatures for the treaty. There was even then a strong feeling of suspicion. This we combated with success by a reference to the words of the treaty, which were too plain and simple to admit of a double meaning. Now the natives will be told that the treaty was a form of words without meaning, and they will think that the missionaries have deceived them for some sinister purpose. Our tupuna must not be made parties to a lie 185 years after the fact. We must speak up for the honour of our tupuna as much as we must stand up for Te Tiriti itself. To us, the Treaty Principles Bill reads as an act of buyer's remorse writ large. We don't like the deal anymore, so we're going to rewrite it. When in fact there is nothing to regret. It was a great deal for everyone and is the envy of the modern world in race relations. The Treaty Principles Bill as they stand have much to offer our nation in reversing and addressing the discriminatory acts of state action for over a century, starting with land confiscation. These court and tribunal derived principles and all the good progress made through them in addressing these terrible impacts must not be torn up and thrown away in the unilateral and historically revisionist way proposed under the bill. As we see it, honouring the treaty is actually very simple. It's not about some two-state solution, but instead, as with kotahitanga, weaving unity from diversity, but more fundamentally about self-determination, letting Māori be Māori in the way they organise their affairs at whānau and hapu level, living in their chosen way in our midst as tangata tiriti Pākehā. It really is simple as that. By contrast, an act of the kāwana, as with this bill, cannot reset our constitutional bedrock, whether through a binary referendum or otherwise, any more than the feet can tell the head what to think. If it is time to have a constitutional conversation about the place of Te Tiriti, let's do that, but in a respectful way designed by both parties to the compact, and that is not this. Ka tautau ko mātou ai e ngā tangata whenua katoa, ia rā, ia marama, ia tau. Toitu Te Tiriti.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Emma, Christian and Tala. Thank you all for being with us this afternoon. That's the 5 minutes. Just want to acknowledge your submission.
Thank you for your time and listening to it. It's greatly appreciated.
We don't have Willie Te Aho with us. There's no other submitters in the room. No, then what we might do is I think we might have to skip all the way to the end with the Oranganui Trust. If we can see if they're available to jump in. They are really, they would be pulling up really early.
Aroha mai, Mr. Chair. Are we going to Te Oranganui now?
Well, we just have to wait and see who's available because none of our next submitters are here.
I think Willie Te Aho is probably on the stage at Te Matatini right about now.
Oh no, he's on another day. He's away.
Oh, he's on another day. Is he on Friday? Oh.
Yeah, he's Friday. If it's Te Oranganui, will they get 10 minutes?
Well, it depends what. I mean, members can look at the agenda. Sorry, we're just trying to figure this out here, but yes, they're scheduled for 10 minutes. Right, kia ora whetūrangi. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for jumping up a bit early and helping us out fill a gap here. So welcome to the committee. Thank you for your time this afternoon. We've got you for 10 minutes ahead of us, so I will hand over to you to begin your presentation.
Kia koutou e wakarongo ana ki ēnei kōrero. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou. Ko wetūrangi Walsh tāpiata tōku ingoa, ko au te mātai wetu o Te Oranganui Trust. Kia ora. My name is Wetūrangi Walsh Tāpiata. I am the Chief Executive Officer for Te Oranganui Trust, an iwi-governed health and social service organisation that is based in Wanganui, but services the geographical region from the Pātea River to the Rangitike River, from Mount Ruapehu all the way down our rivers, our roads and our land out to the sea. We are an organisation that was established by Kahurangi Tāriana Tūria nearly 32 years ago. I take our organisation submission as read, where Te Oranganui was strongly opposed to this bill, and we use this oral opportunity to highlight several aspects. Te tiriti o Waitangi is a relationship between Hapu, iwi and the Crown. It is not a Crown-driven process, but one that should occur conjointly between the various parties. This is not the case if this bill goes forward. Māori are relegated to just another group amongst others. We are being treated as an other rather than a partner. Moana Jackson told us to hold fast to Te Tiriti and its articles and the partnership relationship. He said that if this is lost, then Māori and Hapu iwi are invariably pushed to the end of the line when it comes to discussions and decisions about us. Our relationship is special and should be honoured by the Crown. In our organisation, relationships are key to wellness, and in effect, you would perpetuate the unwellness of us as a people by continuing to diminish this relationship and our partnership. In effect, this leads to an increase in inequities that we as Māori have faced and continue to face. Relationships are never easy, don't we know it? But the Crown needs to be committed to this relationship and to this partnership and not just treat us as an other. Our rohe, at times called Te Rangatupua, has had significant historical trauma that in turn has contributed to significant intergenerational trauma. Colonisation has resulted in the historical trauma of those of us here in our region. Events like the Taranaki land wars, Pākai Tori, and our Awa Tupua claim, which at the time was the longest that we know of. The only Pihama and others argued that in order to engage fully with the impacts of colonisation on Māori well-being, we must articulate fully the impact of historical trauma events and the contribution of those events to the negative health disparities experienced by many of our wānau, hapu and iwi. We work with wānau who throughout the generations have been impacted by this trauma and which is still evident today. We see them in our services of mental health and addictions, prisons, primary care clinics, wānau resilience, truancy from schools. As a Māori iwi provider, we work with all people, but in particular, our Māori wānau come to us. Why? Because as an organisation, one of our foundations is Wānau Ora, where we work with wānau, hearing their voice and identifying their strengths. We are therefore committed to having appropriate cultural approaches that are solution-focused in the way we work. I return to the importance of relationships and emphasise that we have the solutions. We should be at the table and we offer different ways of having a discussion. The use of negative language throughout the submissions connected to this bill have served to perpetuate ignorance and even fear, and leave those who are most disenfranchised in our society, namely Māori, Pasifika, disabled, feeling even more disempowered. We would prefer the use of positive words like kotahitanga, unity and oneness, hononga, joining together. The bill has sown distrust at a time when collective thinking and action and positivity is needed to address the complex challenges that we face as a nation. Yesterday, Te Matatini had its po'iri at Ngā Motu in New Plymouth, where Te Kāui Maunga welcomed the rest of the motu. The words used to describe this event were rongopai and rongomau, a spiritual sense of peace. Today, almost every group that has stood on that stage has talked about Te Tiriti o Waitangi and how important it is. Listen to those words of those who have already spoken to this select committee, and to those who are standing at Te Matatini, and to those of us from Te Oranganui, in stating quite clearly that we oppose this bill. Kia ora koutou.
Rewhitirangi, thank you for that submission. We've got some time for questions. I'm going to go first to Todd Stevenson.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your submission and being here. In the bill, Principle 2, as drafted, actually recognises and protects treaty settlements. Do you think, as drafted, it adequately recognises the settlements that have been reached?
I think there needs to be a continuity of, one, the settlements that have been reached, but in addition, those have yet to come. So that's my first point. But the second point that I would probably raise is the importance of Te Tiriti for whānau, Hapu and iwi. So, you know, for us in my job, the whānau that we work with see that the Tiriti gives us voice, that the Tiriti gives us recognition, and that the Tiriti allows us to be at the table, whether it's in the form of a treaty claim or whether it's in another capacity, via the various ministries that we have relationships with.
Thanks, Whitirangi. Thanks, Todd. Any further questions? No, there doesn't appear to be any further questions. So there's a couple of minutes remaining. If there's anything else you'd like to cover off in the time we have, Whitirangi, you are welcome to. Otherwise, we can draw the submission to a close.
Thank you for the opportunity. I hope that my submission has given you an indicator of what it's like from a regional positioning. You know, and I hope that we've been able to identify not only what happens in our region, but what happens in the context of our work as an iwi-governed health and social service organisation. We're committed to community, we're committed to working collectively, and we do not believe that this bill allows those opportunities.
Well, thank you. Thank you for providing that feedback and that insight. We do appreciate you being with us late in the afternoon. So thank you.
Kia ora koutou.
We're going to go through the agenda, and we're going to have a submission now from Mavis Duncanson. Mavis is joining us online, and we have Mavis with us for 5 minutes this afternoon. So I'll hand over to you, Mavis, to take us through your submission.
Ina mana, ina reo, ina rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to you all today. I'm submitting very much as an individual, as a Pākehā woman, and you've seen my written submission. I think on reflection that my submission is summarised very much by a phrase I have written, that Te Tiriti is a taonga. Te Tiriti is a great treasure to us in Aotearoa. It is, it's a foundation by which I have a place in this motu, by way of the treaty as a Pākehā woman, and that principles of the treaty are derived from applying that treaty to different circumstances. That's the reason that I oppose this bill, because I don't think you can develop principles outside of a relationship that outside of a relationship between the Crown and iwi. It can't be done by one side, and it also can't be done out of context. I kind of grew up with the 3 Ps, partnership, participation, and protection. And I used to trot those out. For me, the Hauora report, the Waitangi Tribunal finding of 2575 reframed those principles markedly, developing the five principles that apply. And I think that's a demonstration, I guess, of being able to look at Te Tiriti in a particular context and then look at what principles you can draw from that. The other key thing that I learnt from Y 2575, and that related particularly to the health system, which is the system that I have worked in most in Aotearoa, that from Y 2575 for too long the principle, well, we've sometimes ignored Te Tiriti, or where it's mentioned, there hasn't been explicit commitment. And that's the reason for one of my recommendations, that our commitment as a nation and as a government, well, as the commitment of the Crown to Te Tiriti needs to be explicit whenever possible. I thank you very much for inviting me to make an oral submission. I'm aware of many more articulate people who have done so, and people with much greater training in constitutional law and other areas. But I really value this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavis. Thank you for being with us. The beauty of the select committee process is that you don't have to be an academic or an expert to provide a submission and a viewpoint on whether or not a bill should pass or not. So thank you for being with us. I'll go to Todd Stevenson. There is some time for questions. Thanks,
Mavis, and thanks for being here today. In your submission, you do say that the Crown has the right to, it has the duty to protect the rights and interests of Maori, which is a pretty straightforward statement. But then you go on to say that these rights and interests aren't derived from ancestry. So who gets those rights and interests?
Thank you. I just need to think about that for a minute. I think ancestry has been used in a lot of the rhetoric around this bill. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's by right. The reason those rights are there are not because of a person's ancestry. The reasons those rights are there are because of Indigenous status. And I do realise there's some overlap between those two, but it's not it's the place of tangata whenua that underpins the rights of people. Now, yes, that is true. There will be an element of ancestry in that, but it's because of that Indigenous status, I would say. I'm sure there are people who can speak to this much more eloquently than I can. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
That's perfectly fine. Thank you, Mavis. Thank you for your time this afternoon and for addressing the questions of the committee. We do appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to ask now a submission from Johnathon Bentley-Cribb to come to the table. Johnathon, kia ora. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We have you for 5 minutes this afternoon, so I'll hand over to you to begin your presentation.
Sure, thank you. Firstly, I just want to address the previous question that came from Todd, if that's all right.
Yep, it's your 5 minutes to use it as you see fit.
Well, the question about ancestry, I think the Te Tiriti is an agreement between the Crown and Māori, the leader of iwi and Hapu. And so, of course, this is always going to come back to ancestry because it's about who are the descendants of the people who signed Te Tiriti. hundreds of years ago. Moving on to what I'm here to say myself, I wanted to talk about partnership and what that actually means in the context of Māori and Crown relationships. And so we have all these high-flying ideas, but what does it look like in practice? What does partnership look like? And I want to turn to Te Whare Tapa Whā, which is a Māori approach to health, which is holistic. And it's a model that's being adopted by not only Māori, but also the Ministry of Health and MHAIDS, for example. Now, these organisations are, of course, Crown entities, and they're able to adopt Te Whare Tapa Whā because of the partnership that exists between the Crown and Māori. The Crown agrees to protect taonga like Te Whare Tapa Whā, and for that protection, Māori are willing to share their experience and their knowledge with the Crown for the betterment of everyone in this country. Now, we have this bill, the Treaty Principles Bill, which threatens to completely dismantle the partnership that Te Tiriti has brought forward. And to that, I just want to say that Te Tiriti can't be changed when it's politically convenient. It's an agreement between the Crown and Māori, and the Crown doesn't get to change it as it pleases. Risking the partnership means risking the Māori solutions that are working for everyone. And all of this just to score a couple of votes. So well done, ACT. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. Todd has a question.
Well, thanks, Jonathan, and thanks for responding to my earlier question. Where do you think the New Zealand Crown gets its authority from?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Where do you think that the Crown, obviously, as you're saying, is a partner, but where do you think the Crown gets its authority from?
Yeah, well, when we look back to Te Tiriti itself, it talks about the partnership, and ultimately the authority that the Crown has now was taken by the Crown. It was not given by Māori. And the reality is we live in a country where the Crown has authority. And so we have to accept that. But that doesn't mean that we have to put up with a bill that completely wants to undermine the little authority that Māori do have now. And so going back to your original question, the authority of the Crown comes because it was taken by the Crown. Authority was taken. It wasn't given. It was taken. And now we're here talking about a bill that wants to increase the authority of the Crown without any proper consultation of Māori and without the consent of Māori, and that is wrong.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Todd. Are there any further questions from members? If there's none, there is a minute and a half left, Jonathan. If there's anything else you'd like to cover off or summarise for the committee, you are entitled to use your full 5 minutes.
Oh, that's okay. If no one else has any questions, then I'll give the 1 minute back.
Oh, all good. Give us an early dinner. Thank you. Hey, look, thank you for being with us this afternoon. It's obviously later in the day and it's the end of a pretty intense day. So I just wanted to acknowledge you sticking it out and being with us this afternoon and for providing your oral submission. It is appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
And congratulations on becoming a minister.
That's enough of that. They want that minute back now as well. Hey, we're going to now go to, I think, our last submission of the day. And if we've got Tania with us, so Tania Tapsell is going to join us. Kia ora, Tania. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. The committee has you scheduled in for 10 minutes this afternoon, so I'll hand over to you to begin your presentation.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Tupihi roto, tupihi waho, tupihi te whai te ao marama. We grow within, we grow without, we grow into the dawn and abroad to be able to present at a time when many people who wish to present were not able to. I do apologise that currently I'm travelling.
Yeah, Tania, I'm not sure if you're in a great location, but I wonder if you want to maybe turn your video off because we're getting a lot of lag and a bit of jumpiness. So if you turn your video off, maybe that'll come through clearer.
Does it come through clearer now?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was important for me to submit to this bill as the Mayor of Rotorua. It has been an incredibly divisive bill that has gone through Parliament, and we have seen tens of thousands of people across the country march, both Māori and non-Māori. I want to acknowledge the many leaders who have organised these marches and these hikoi, because it is our community that is churning out, and we appreciate that very much. In Rotorua, we were established on the values of tātou tātou, which means we together, partnership. We have our hospital, our schools, and many public facilities where our iwi had gifted land in the founding of our city for us to be able to benefit now and into future, and we are grateful for that. What we have seen and experienced in Rotorua, both through our commitment in the Local Government Act and the Resource Management Act, has been a commitment to engage with Māori. I'm here today to oppose this bill and to let people know that partnership and empowering Māori and iwi only brings greater benefit. It's been very upsetting seeing our future leaders listen and see our government questioning their value and the value of our founding document in this country. When I was only 11 years old, me and my family marched to Wellington when the Foreshore Seabed Act was being passed. It was in that moment that I realised the decision-making ability of politicians and the impact that that has on others. I can see that through this latest hikoi, there would be many people who have participated, and I look forward to seeing them grow into these roles of leadership as well. I strongly believe that our first Māori Prime Minister is here living and waiting to step up. And I look forward to Māori being more involved in politics and in decision making as well. I especially want to acknowledge that in Rotorua, we have had benefits from our partnerships with iwi in terms of key resources to support our community. We have access to water, we have access to forest, we have access to land because our iwi were kind enough to allow us to. We take for granted the fight and the pain that has been many generations for us to be learning our language, for us to be supporting our culture, for us to be growing businesses and promoting New Zealand to the world is because of our strong Māori culture. Our Rotorua community deeply value Te Tiriti o Waitangi as a foundational document on relationships for iwi and hapu. Whether it was back in 1880 when the Rotorua Township Agreement was signed, or even now when we endeavour to be world class, we need iwi support. It's very disappointing that iwi have had to question whether this government values or even understands what they do and the benefits that they bring. In Rotorua, half of our population is Māori, so our policies and initiatives must reflect and support Māori communities' needs and aspirations. We also encourage long-term dialogue, and I'm really proud that in Rotorua, at a time when this Treaty Principles Bill is being passed, we have set up and established Te Atua Vision 2050 Committee. This ensures that we're working directly with our iwi and hapu to ensure a better Rotorua for all. I support our government to look very closely at the many benefits that we have experienced and that we have in future when working alongside iwi. This bill will create significant legal and financial uncertainties, and it will undermine council and iwi partnership, which harms not only iwi, but also the wider community. This bill opposes the rights and values embedded in council's core functions across Aotearoa and effective execution of local government duties. I strongly urge and encourage this government to not only oppose this bill, but actually to dig deeper, to remember who we started with, who welcomed us, who looks after us, and who will be our future. We thank the many people who have engaged in this bill. I feel very honoured to be able to present to this, knowing that many people who were not able to, who wanted to, I am very honoured to share my voice today, not only as myself, but also on behalf of the Rotorua community. I also acknowledge that it is very obvious the differences that we've seen on the submissions for Māori issues. We had a Māori wards bill that was passed only allowing 3 working days to be able to provide our feedback and our input. And the treaty principle submissions opened up over Christmas and New Year's when many people were not able to engage. So I want to acknowledge that when you go out and you ask for local government reviews or speed limit reviews, and you give ample time for people to engage, it has been very disappointing to see the discrimination of such short timeframes for issues that are related to Māori. So as Rotorua Lakes Council and as the Mayor of Rotorua, we will continue to endeavour to support our Māori community. We will lose nothing. There is only everything to gain. Kei Aoringaringa te ao, the world is yours. Only if we work tātou tātou, we together. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you.
Kia ora, Tania. Thank you for that submission. We've got time for a couple of questions and I've got two lined up. First one's from Huhana Linden and then Todd Stevenson.
Tēnā koe te koromatua, Tania. Tēnei rā te mihi. This is Huhana Linden from the Green Party. Mihi to you today. I'm wanting to really explore with you and have you share with us the journey of local government in Rotorua and that maturing of the relationship. I think in local government, you guys have got such a strong model around iwi Māori partnership, but also bringing through Māori voice through our general council seats as well. But it's been in development over a number of years, and there's learning for us in this panel to understand that much of what is being done now has been already completed and, you know, like been successful in local government. Can you share some insights with us?
Yes, and thank you very much for the opportunity, Huhana. We have definitely in Rotorua benefited from the partnership with Māori. When we have faced some of our biggest challenges, whether it was a civil defence crisis or needing more housing, we know that working alongside iwi Māori has been beneficial for us. As I mentioned, we're quite unique. Before the Treaty of Waitangi was signed, we actually signed our own local treaty, which was called the Fenton or Rotorua Township Agreement. That was signed by Hapu that, as I mentioned, gifted land and resources to benefit all in our community. And even now, some of the proudest things that I have witnessed in council is actually council giving back not only land, but also resources such as springs. And we always see that despite some concerns of iwi ownership of these resources, iwi are supporting everyone. What's good for Māori is good for everyone.
Thanks, Tania. Question from Todd Stevenson.
Thanks, Tania. Thanks for being with us. It's obviously a busy day for you, so appreciate it. You know, we've heard submissions that basically the current principles of the treaty we have were a bit of a political fix, right, to try and reconcile the English and the Maori versions. Do you think there is actually value in trying to codify the articles of the treaty, the 3 articles, and actually getting some common understanding, having Parliament codify those?
Well, it certainly depends on what your intention is. If you wish to do that to benefit Māori and the rest of New Zealand, then yes, let's look into that. But there is no doubt that this Treaty Principles Bill is being put through to not only marginalise, but to further harm Māori. The mere fact that you have 2 parties of the Treaty of Waitangi and the government did not engage with Māori before going out with this bill explains and shows very clearly the intention of this government. So there could be benefit, but I ask respectfully that you have positive intentions that will benefit all.
Thanks, Tania. That's our 10 minutes on the clock today. So just on behalf of the committee, I want to acknowledge well, both the work you're doing in your community, but for also being with us today. Really appreciated your time and all the best for the rest of the day.
Thank you very much, everyone. Ngā mihi.
Well, folks, now I think that is us for the day. So thanks everyone for being with us all morning and all afternoon. We are halfway through our subcommittee hearings for the week. So I'll see everyone back tomorrow morning bright and early at 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.